In the dark underbelly of Chicago's drill rap scene, where violence and authenticity go hand in hand, one name has been making waves for all the wrong reasons. Bloodhound Q50, real name Michaela Cooper, has built his entire career on a foundation of lies, deception, and stolen valor from the streets. While the world watched in horror and fascination as he bragged about catching 8 hats, street slang for 8 murders, the truth behind this suburban kid's transformation into a supposed serial killer is far more pathetic than anyone could have imagined. Today, we're going to expose the biggest fraud in drill rap history. We're going to peel back the layers of this carefully constructed persona and reveal how a privileged kid from Indiana managed to fool an entire genre into believing he was one of Chicago's most dangerous killers. And we're also going to debunk every hat this goofy claimed. This is the story of how Bloodhound Q50 got rich fooling fans into thinking he was a serial killer. The suburban origins. Let's start from the beginning, because the truth about Q50's background is nothing like the image he's tried to project. While he wants you to believe he's a product of Chicago's most violent streets, the reality is far different. Michaela Cooper, better known as Bloodhound Q50, was born on August 6, 2004, not in the war-torn neighborhoods of Chicago, but in the comfortable suburbs of Indiana. According to multiple sources, and even his own neighbors who have come forward, Q50 grew up in Merrillville, Indiana, in what can only be described as a nice, middle-class neighborhood. One of his former neighbors even went viral on social media, showing his exact house and exposing the truth about his upbringing. This wasn't some crack house in the projects. This was a well-maintained suburban home with a loving family. His mother, who has been documented extensively on social media, was clearly devoted to her son. She bought him whatever he wanted, from the latest shoes to expensive clothes. Q50 himself has mentioned in interviews how he had the latest shoes growing up and everything he wanted. This is hardly the background of someone who was forced into a life of violence out of necessity. The family had strong values too. Q50's uncles had military and Navy backgrounds, representing the kind of disciplined, law-abiding family structure that's the complete opposite of the gang lifestyle he would later claim. His grandmother lived in Chicago, and it was during visits to see her that Q50 would first encounter the world that would eventually consume his identity, or at least the identity he wanted to project. But here's where the story gets interesting. Even with all these advantages, even with a loving family and every opportunity handed to him, Q50 made a conscious choice to abandon this life. And it wasn't because of some tragic circumstance or desperate situation. It was because he wanted to be something he wasn't. Like many young men, Q50 had dreams of making it big through sports. He was actually a talented basketball player in his youth, with his grandfather even posting on social media back in 2012 about how little Q50 had promised to buy him a fancy car when he made it to the NBA. His uncle would brag about taking one 4-year-old Q50 to play with grown men and how he held his own. But there was one problem that would derail these dreams before they ever really got started: Q50's height. At just 5'3", he was simply too short to compete at the higher levels of basketball. When he failed to make his high school's varsity team, it became clear that his hoop dreams were over. This is a crucial moment in understanding Q50's psychology. Here was a young man who had been told he could have anything he wanted, who had been praised and supported by his family, suddenly facing his first real rejection. Instead of finding another positive outlet or pursuing education, Q50 made a fateful decision. He decided that if he couldn't be famous for basketball, he'd find another way to get attention and respect. And that's when he turned his eyes toward Chicago and the lifestyle his cousin was living. Bloodhound Lil Jeff, Q50's cousin, who was actually living the life that Q50 would later claim as his own. Jeffrey Harris, known in the streets as Lil Jeff, was a legitimate product of Chicago's violent drill scene. Unlike his suburban cousin, Jeff had grown up in the actual trenches, witnessed real violence from a young age, and was genuinely involved in the street life that would eventually cost him his life. Jeff was everything Q50 wanted to be: authentic, feared, and respected in the streets. While Q50 was playing high school basketball in Indiana, Jeff was already deep in gang activity with the Bloodhounds, a notorious Chicago set. Jeff had the credibility that Q50 desperately craved. And more importantly, Jeff had the body count that Q50 would later try to claim as his own. The relationship between these cousins is crucial to understanding how Q50's deception began. During his high school years, Q50 would visit Chicago and spend time with Jeff and the Bloodhounds. These visits gave him just enough exposure to the real street life to learn the language, understand the culture, and most importantly, to witness the respect that came with being genuinely dangerous. But there's a massive difference between visiting the streets and living them. Q50 was always the outsider looking in, the suburban kid playing dress-up in a world he didn't truly understand. While Jeff was catching real bodies and building a legitimate reputation as one of Chicago's most feared young killers, Q50 was going back to his comfortable home in Indiana, probably doing homework and sleeping in his own bed. After graduating from Merrillville High School in 2022, Q50 made the decision that would define the rest of his life. He moved to Chicago to be closer to his cousin Jeff and the Bloodhounds. This wasn't a kid fleeing poverty or violence. This was a conscious choice to abandon a stable, loving home for the perceived glamour of street life. The transformation didn't happen overnight. At first, Q50 was clearly out of his element. He appeared in some of Jeff's early music videos, usually masked up and trying to look tough, but anyone with street knowledge could see he was playing a role. He was the kid in the background, trying to learn how to hold a gun properly, trying to understand the slang, trying to fit into a world that wasn't his. But Q50 was a quick study, and he had one major advantage. He was related to someone who was genuinely about that life. Jeff's reputation provided Q50 with protection and credibility by association. When people saw Q50 with Jeff, they assumed he must be cut from the same cloth. This assumption would become the foundation of Q50's entire fraudulent career. During this period, Q50 began to adopt the mannerisms, the language, and the attitude of someone who had lived this life from birth. He got the tattoos, he learned to talk the talk, and most importantly, he started to claim involvement in activities that he had only witnessed from the sidelines. One of the most revealing moments in Q50's career came during a live stream that went viral for all the wrong reasons. In this stream, Q50 was asked about his relationship with God and whether he'd ever had to talk to that man about his actions. His response was chilling and revealed the calculated nature of his persona. Q50 responded by saying he'd talked to God and been grateful, but then made a comment about giving God birthday presents, referring to the people he claimed to have killed. The casual way he discussed taking lives, the smug satisfaction in his voice, and the clear enjoyment he got from shocking his audience revealed something important. This wasn't the response of someone haunted by violence or someone who had been forced into a life of killing. This was someone who was performing, someone who was enjoying the reaction he was getting. Real killers, people who have actually taken lives, don't typically brag about it in such a casual, almost gleeful manner. They understand the weight of what they've done. But Q50's response was that of someone playing a character, someone who had never actually felt the weight of taking a human life, but had watched enough movies and listened to enough rap songs to know what would get a reaction. The fact that this moment went viral and was celebrated by some fans shows how successfully Q50 had managed to fool people. But for those who understood the streets, this moment was a red flag. It was too performative, too calculated, too much like someone who was trying too hard to convince people of something that wasn't true. The rookie mistake that exposed everything. But if there was any doubt about Q50's authenticity, it was completely shattered during one particular incident that was caught on camera and later exposed by none other than his cousin Lil Jeff. This incident would become known as the moment Q50's fraud was exposed for everyone to see. During what was supposed to be a hit, a real street operation where lives were on the line, Q50's inexperience and lack of genuine street knowledge became painfully obvious. According to the footage and Jeff's own words, Q50 made several critical mistakes that not only endangered the operation but also revealed him to be exactly what many suspected, a rookie playing in a game he didn't understand. First, Q50 apparently didn't know how to properly operate a switch, a modified automatic weapon that's standard equipment in these situations. For someone claiming to have 8 bodies, not knowing how to use basic street weaponry was a dead giveaway. This is like a supposed professional chef not knowing how to use a knife. It immediately exposes the lie. But the most embarrassing moment came when Q50 literally slipped and fell, doing what witnesses described as the splits during a crucial moment of the operation. This wasn't just a minor stumble. This was a complete breakdown of composure and coordination at the exact moment when professionalism and experience were most needed. Lil Jeff, who was genuinely about that life and had real experience in these situations, was reportedly furious. Not only had Q50's incompetence potentially compromised the operation, but it had also allowed their targets to escape. Jeff's anger wasn't just about the failed mission, it was about being embarrassed by his amateur cousin in front of people who mattered. The fact that this incident was caught on camera and later discussed openly shows just how badly Q50 had messed up. In the street world, reputation is everything, and Q50 had just revealed himself to be a fraud in the most public way possible. This brings us to the heart of Q50's deception, his claim of having 8 hats, or 8 murders to his name. This number has been the cornerstone of his reputation, the source of his street credibility, and the foundation of his entire rap career. But the evidence suggests that this claim is not just exaggerated, it's completely fabricated. Let's examine the timeline and the evidence. Q50's alleged body count seems to coincide suspiciously with his cousin Jeff's actual activities. When Jeff was genuinely active in the streets, catching real bodies and building a legitimate reputation as a killer, Q50 was conveniently always nearby, ready to claim credit for activities he had only witnessed. The pattern becomes clear when you look at specific incidents. Take, for example, the case of Baby KD, a member of an opposing set who was killed in March 2024. Right after this murder, Q50 updated his claimed body count and started trolling the victim on social media. But here's the problem. Lil Jeff was in Los Angeles at the time and didn't even bother claiming this particular killing. More importantly, a member from a different set, someone who goes by Shields, was recently arrested by federal authorities for this exact murder. This raises serious questions about Q50's claims. If he really killed Baby KD, why was someone else arrested for it? If he's really responsible for 8 murders, why do the timelines and evidence point to other people being the actual perpetrators? The most likely explanation is that Q50 has been systematically claiming credit for murders committed by others, particularly his cousin Jeff. When Jeff would catch a body, Q50 would be there to witness it, and later he would claim it as his own work. This would explain why his body count claims always seem to align with periods when Jeff was most active. What makes Q50's deception so insidious is how calculated and performative it is. Unlike someone who might exaggerate their involvement in street activities out of insecurity or peer pressure, Q50 has built an entire brand around his false claims. He's not just lying to fit in, he's lying to profit. His music career is entirely built on the foundation of these false claims. Songs where he brags about specific murders, social media posts where he taunts the families of victims, interviews where he casually discusses taking lives. All of this content is designed to monetize his fake reputation as a killer. This isn't just cultural appropriation, it's something far worse. Q50 is profiting off the real pain and trauma of communities he was never truly part of. He's taking the genuine experiences of people like his cousin Jeff, who actually lived this life and paid the ultimate price for it, and turning them into content for his own benefit. The performance aspect becomes even more obvious when you compare Q50's behavior to that of people who have actually lived this life. Real killers don't typically brag about their body count in interviews. They don't make jokes about going to hell. They don't treat murder like a game or a marketing strategy. The fact that Q50 does all of these things reveals the performative nature of his entire persona. The relationship between Q50 and his cousin Jeff is perhaps the most tragic aspect of this entire story. Jeff was the real deal, someone who had genuinely lived the life that Q50 was pretending to live. Jeff had the scars, the trauma, and the authentic street credibility that Q50 desperately wanted. But Jeff also paid the ultimate price for his lifestyle. In June 2024, Lil Jeff was killed in a shootout, dying exactly the way he had lived, violently and young. His death was captured on security camera, showing the world the brutal reality of the life he had chosen. Q50's reaction to Jeff's death was telling. Instead of using this tragedy as a wake-up call, instead of recognizing that the lifestyle he was pretending to live had just claimed his cousin's life, Q50 doubled down on his deception. He used Jeff's death as an opportunity to further his own career, releasing songs that claimed Jeff's murders as his own and using his cousin's reputation to boost his own credibility. This is perhaps the most disgusting aspect of Q50's fraud. He's literally profiting off his dead cousin's reputation, claiming credit for murders that Jeff committed while Jeff can no longer defend his own legacy. It's a level of betrayal that goes beyond simple lying. It's a complete desecration of his cousin's memory. As Q50's profile has grown, so has the scrutiny of his claims. Street watchers, investigative content creators, and even law enforcement have begun to piece together the truth about his background and his claims. The evidence against his authenticity has become overwhelming. Multiple sources have confirmed his suburban upbringing. Former neighbors have come forward with photos and stories that contradict his street origin story. The timeline of his alleged murders doesn't match up with documented evidence. Most damning of all, other people have been arrested for crimes he's claimed to commit. The Baby KD case is just one example. When federal authorities arrested Shields for this murder, it exposed Q50's claim as false. If he really killed Baby KD, why was someone else charged with the crime? The answer is obvious. Because Q50 didn't do it. This pattern repeats across multiple cases. When you dig into the specifics of Q50's claimed body count, you find that the evidence points to other perpetrators. The most likely explanation is that Q50 was present for some of these incidents as an observer or minor participant, but he's inflated his role to claim credit for murders he didn't commit. Understanding Q50's psychology is crucial to understanding how this deception was possible. Here's someone who grew up with every advantage: a loving family, financial stability, educational opportunities, but who chose to abandon all of that for the perceived glamour of street life. This isn't someone who was forced into violence by circumstances. This isn't someone who grew up in poverty with no other options. This is someone who made a conscious choice to pursue a lifestyle that he had only observed from the outside. And when he couldn't authentically live that lifestyle, he decided to fake it. The psychology here is similar to that of other fraudsters and imposters throughout history. Q50 saw something he wanted: respect, fear, credibility. And when he couldn't earn it legitimately, he decided to steal it. The difference is that instead of stealing money or material goods, he's stealing reputation and credibility from people who actually live the life he's pretending to have lived. There's also an element of narcissism in Q50's behavior. The casual way he discusses murder, the enjoyment he gets from shocking people, the complete lack of empathy for victims and their families. All of this points to someone who sees other people as props in his own performance, rather than as human beings with inherent worth. Q50's fraud has implications that go far beyond his own career. His success in fooling people has damaged the credibility of drill rap as a genre and has made it harder for authentic artists to be taken seriously. Drill rap, whatever you think of its content, has always been valued for its authenticity. The genre emerged from real experiences of violence and poverty, and its power comes from the fact that the artists are often speaking from genuine experience. When someone like Q50 can fake their way to success in the genre, it undermines the authenticity that makes drill rap meaningful. Moreover, Q50's fraud trivializes real violence and real trauma. When he jokes about murder and brags about taking lives he never took, he's making light of genuine tragedy. The families of real murder victims have to watch this suburban kid profit off fake claims about their loved ones' deaths. There's also the impact on young people who look up to Q50. His success sends the message that authenticity doesn't matter, that you can fake your way to success, and that violence is something to be celebrated rather than avoided. These are dangerous messages that can have real-world consequences. While Q50 has managed to avoid serious legal consequences so far, his public claims about committing murders could potentially create legal problems for him in the future. When you publicly claim to have committed specific crimes, you're essentially confessing, and those confessions can be used as evidence. The fact that Q50 has been arrested multiple times, only to be quickly released, suggests that law enforcement may be building a case against him. His public statements, his social media posts, and his song lyrics could all potentially be used as evidence if prosecutors decide to pursue charges. There's also the possibility that Q50's fraud could be prosecuted under other statutes. If he's profiting off false claims about committing crimes, that could potentially be considered fraud. If he's using his fake reputation to intimidate or threaten people, that could be considered criminal intimidation. The legal system moves slowly, but Q50's public profile and his explicit claims about committing crimes make him a target for prosecution. The question isn't whether he'll face legal consequences, but when. To truly understand how fraudulent Q50's claims are, it's worth comparing him to people who have actually lived the life he's pretending to have lived. Take King Von, for example, who was widely respected in the drill scene for his authenticity. Von had documented legal troubles, real street credibility, and the scars, both physical and psychological, that come from actually living that lifestyle. Vaughn didn't need to constantly brag about his body count or make jokes about going to hell. His authenticity spoke for itself through his music, his demeanor, and the respect he commanded from people who actually knew the streets. When Vaughn talked about violence in his music, it came from a place of real experience and often real trauma. Compare that to Q50, who constantly needs to remind people of his supposed body count, who makes performative statements about violence, and who seems to enjoy the shock value of his claims more than anything else. The difference between authentic street figures and Q50 is obvious to anyone who understands the culture. Real street figures also understand the consequences of their lifestyle. They know that violence begets violence, that the streets don't love anybody, and that the lifestyle they're living is ultimately destructive. Q50, on the other hand, seems to view street life as a game or a performance, without understanding the real human cost. Q50's fraud wouldn't have been possible without enablers. People in the music industry, media, and fan community who either didn't do their due diligence or who chose to ignore red flags because Q50's story was profitable or entertaining. Record labels, booking agents, and media outlets have a responsibility to verify the authenticity of the artists they promote, especially when those artists are making explicit claims about committing violent crimes. The fact that Q50 has been able to build a successful career based on false claims suggests that the industry has failed in this responsibility. There's also the role of social media and streaming platforms in amplifying Q50's message. These platforms have policies against promoting violence, but they've allowed Q50 to build a following based on his claims about committing murders. The algorithms that determine what content gets promoted have essentially rewarded Q50 for his violent rhetoric, regardless of whether it's authentic. The fan community also bears some responsibility. The people who celebrate Q50's claims, who share his content, and who treat him like a hero are enabling his fraud. They're creating a market for fake authenticity and rewarding someone for trivializing real violence. While Q50 is the perpetrator of this fraud, there are real victims who have been harmed by his deception. First and foremost are the families of actual murder victims who have to watch Q50 profit off false claims about their loved ones' deaths. Imagine being the family member of someone who was actually murdered, and then watching some suburban kid from Indiana claim credit for that murder in order to boost his rap career. The pain and anger that must cause is unimaginable, and it adds insult to the injury of their original loss. There are also the authentic artists in the drill scene who are being overshadowed by Q50's fraud. These are people who have actually lived the experiences they rap about, who have real stories to tell, but who are being pushed aside by someone who's better at marketing his fake story than they are at telling their real ones. The communities that drill rap emerged from are also victims of Q50's fraud. These communities have real problems: poverty, violence, lack of opportunity, and drill. Rap has often served as a way to tell their stories and bring attention to their struggles. When someone like Q50 appropriates their culture for profit, it trivializes their real experiences and makes it harder for their authentic voices to be heard. Q50's fraud is ultimately unsustainable. The truth has a way of coming out, and the more successful he becomes, the more scrutiny his claims will face. We're already seeing cracks in his story, with other people being arrested for crimes he's claimed to commit, and with more details about his suburban background coming to light. The question is, what will happen when the full extent of his deception is exposed? Will he face legal consequences for his false claims? Will his career survive the revelation that his entire persona is fake? Will the industry learn from this and do better due diligence in the future? There's also the question of what message Q50's eventual downfall will send. Will it serve as a cautionary tale about the dangers of cultural appropriation and fraud? Or will it just be seen as another example of someone who got caught lying? The impact on Q50 personally could be severe. He's built his entire identity around this false persona, and when it collapses, he'll be left with nothing. He's burned bridges with his family, alienated himself from his suburban community, and built a career on lies. When the truth comes out, he may find himself with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. Q50's fraud raises broader questions about authenticity, cultural appropriation, and the commodification of violence in popular culture. How did we get to a point where someone can build a successful career by falsely claiming to be a serial killer? What does this say about our society's relationship with violence and authenticity? There's also the question of responsibility. Who is responsible for stopping frauds like Q50? Is it the industry's responsibility to verify authenticity? Is it the media's responsibility to investigate claims? Is it the fan community's responsibility to demand truth? The rise of social media has made it easier for people like Q50 to build false personas and reach large audiences without traditional gatekeepers. But it's also made it easier to expose frauds when people are willing to do the investigative work. The question is whether we as a society are willing to prioritize truth over entertainment. Bloodhound Q50's story is ultimately a cautionary tale about the dangers of building your life on lies. He had every advantage: a loving family, financial stability, educational opportunities. But he chose to abandon all of that for the perceived glamour of a lifestyle he could never authentically live. His fraud has harmed real people, the families of murder victims, authentic artists in the drill scene, and the communities that drill rap emerged from. He's trivialized real violence, appropriated real trauma, and profited off experiences that were never his to claim. But perhaps most tragically, he's wasted his own potential. Instead of using his advantages to build something positive, instead of finding his own authentic path to success, he chose to steal someone else's story and make it his own. In doing so, he's not only harmed others, he's ultimately destroyed himself. The truth about Q50 is finally coming to light, and when it does, his house of cards will collapse. The suburban kid from Indiana who fooled everybody into thinking he was a serial killer will be exposed for what he really is: a fraud who was never authentic enough to make it on his own merits. The question now is what we as a society will learn from this deception. Will we become more skeptical of claims that seem too outrageous to be true? Will we demand better verification from the industries that promote these artists? Will we stop rewarding people for appropriating trauma and violence that isn't theirs to claim? Q50's fraud was possible because we allowed it to be possible. We celebrated his claims without investigating them. We rewarded his performance without demanding authenticity. We made it profitable to be fake and dangerous to be real. The unraveling of Q50's lie is an opportunity for all of us to do better, to demand truth over entertainment, to support authentic voices over manufactured personas, to remember that behind every claim of violence is real human suffering that shouldn't be trivialized or appropriated for profit. Bloodhound Q50 may have fooled everybody for a while, but the truth always comes out in the end. And when it does, we'll all have to reckon with how we allowed this fraud to happen and what we're going to do to prevent it from happening again. The suburban serial killer was never real. It was always just a performance by someone who was too insecure to be himself and too dishonest to earn respect the right way. Now that the performance is over, all that's left is the truth. And the truth is that Q50 was never the killer he claimed to be. He was just a kid from Indiana who wanted to be something he wasn't, and who was willing to lie, cheat, and steal to get there. The real tragedy isn't just that he fooled so many people. It's that he fooled himself into thinking that this lie could last forever. But lies never do. And now, as the truth comes crashing down around him, Q50 will have to face the consequences of choosing deception over authenticity, performance over truth, and fraud over genuine achievement.